Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. I'm twitching a little bit. It's a Saturday, and I should be going door to door. I've been going door to door. I think I've gone probably 20, 25 Saturdays of this year. It's scary. I ran for State Central Committee. I filed in December. This primary was crazy. We ran in March, so I went door to door during the winter months. My goodness, that primary was terrible. Then my congressman, I'm going to introduce him a little bit, had a special election in June. We kept on trucking through June, and now we're still campaigning for Trump and for Warren and for all of our Ohio candidates for the fall. So I've been campaigning since Christmas, and boy, I'm exhausted. I'm tired of it. But I wanted to introduce my congressman. I suffered for 20 years in the Ohio 8th District under the leadership of Speaker John Boehner. John Boehner, he started out as a great leader in the 90s, from what I heard from a lot of people. But over time, he lost his soul up there in DC, and that happens. Over the years, we had a lot of battles, he and I. I don't know if he knew my name, but he knew I was that annoying Tea Party lady. It got so bad 5-6 years ago now. Speaker Boehner actually hand-selected someone in my neighborhood, and we're going to talk more about Central Committee later in the afternoon. But he handpicked someone in my neighborhood to run against me for my little tiny Central Committee seat. The gentleman who ran against me was actually pretty handsome. He was 25 years old. He was a swimmer in college. Nice-looking kid. I liked him a lot. But Speaker Boehner's office spent $2,000 on that race. Now, that doesn't sound a lot in the big scheme of things, but the vote total was 56 to 48 votes total. 120 votes in our race. That's it. Central Committee races matter. They're that important that the Speaker of the House got involved to get rid of me because I have a big mouth. So we're going to talk more about that as we go, but one of the reasons that I wanted to introduce Warren was I had to make a decision at some point to stay in the game because I lost. I was a loser. Do I stay in the game or do I keep on going? So I had a long talk with my husband, with my family, and I decided to say yes. I'm in. I've got 3 kids. I run a small company, startup company. I'm busy. I'm as busy as anybody in here. Everybody has their challenges. But I had to sit down with myself and say, yes, I'm in it for the long term. And this is the 10-year, 20-year, 15-year, gosh, I'm 40. Could be a 40-year plan to change the nation, change Ohio, and more importantly, change my little county. Because like Maurice said, that's where I have the most influence. So when my seat for Congress came up, I wasn't crazy about all the guys that were running. We had 15 people running. And I got a call from a guy who said, hey, do you have a candidate yet? I said, no, not really excited. And he said, I got a guy I want you to meet. And I met Warren. One of the things Warren's going to talk about himself, he's really good at talking about himself. He's amazing. But one of the things that I loved about Warren that made me committed to him was he also said yes. He decided that he was in it for the long term. He was a business owner, a father, an upstanding member of his community. He had a million things he could have done with his time. But he said, yes, I'm in it to change my country. And that's what I want you to think about, what you could say yes to, because it's that important. We all have to find our little yes. So it's my honor to introduce our keynote speaker today, my Congressman, Warren Davidson.
Thank you all. It's definitely an honor to be here today and an honor to talk about defending our freedom, defending the way of life our founders worked to give us and tried to establish and protect with the Constitution. So for me, This time last year, if you would have told me I was going to be a member of Congress, I would have laughed. I would say, that's funny. I think most of us would have laughed if this time last year, maybe by September, there was some writing on the wall. But last summer, most of us would not have believed that John Boehner wouldn't be Speaker of the House. You know, just like we'd be surprised if Mitch McConnell isn't Senate Majority Leader soon. So when that happened, I was not planning to run for Congress. Kind of like Ann said, I said yes to an opportunity. A couple people said, hey, why don't you think about running for Congress? I said, Mike cuts that every now. That's not what I said. What I said was, that's crazy. Well, no, because that's crazy. And I was looking like a lot of people in our district is this one live too? It is. Okay, so I was looking like a lot of people to see who is going to be in this race. Who do I get behind? And I knew a few people. So someone I knew well for 5 minutes asked me, who do you like in this race? And I said, who do I like? Well, I know this guy's running. And he said, well, is that who you're going to vote for? And I said, well, no, probably not. And we went over why not. We asked about who else was going to run. And so I kind of left that discussion and I went around and asked who is going to run. And I knew a few people. Frankly, at least one guy who I thought would have most of the Liberty Group support in this area, and probably did the day I started. And I was kind of surprised that as I started talking about campaigning, that we built the kind of momentum we did. And so when I heard Tom talk, I kind of came at this not as a political guy, as a business guy, but committed to the principles of liberty, committed to supporting and defending our Constitution. So when I won the special election on June 7th, and when we traveled to Washington, D.C., and swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, on June 9th, that wasn't the first time I swore that oath. I did that in uniform, and I took that oath very seriously. Lisa reminded me of this as we started the campaign. I used to have a copy of the Constitution behind my desk. And when I would have soldiers, I'd ask them, do you remember your oath? And some of them did, and some of them didn't. And I would remind them of the oath. And then I would ask, when's the last time you read the Constitution? Some of them don't remember ever reading it. And so some of them did, and hey, this is what it is. Good. And I gave it to them. I didn't have an education class. I didn't do all that. We were focused on running an infantry unit. But that's something I did. And so that's what I thought I'd spend a career doing. So you come back and look and say, how did you get here? Well, last fall, when I wasn't thinking about doing this, and I wasn't remembering all the things about the oath, I was still fired up about politics and the direction of our country. I had a lot of concerns. Frankly, like most of the country, I didn't have high expectations for Congress and have been quite disappointed. So when John Boehner resigned and I looked around and had that thought, who is going to run, and somebody suggested me, I didn't take it very seriously. But then when my wife believed in me and she said, hey, you really would be good at this. And then I talked to a couple other people and said, yeah, you should really think hard about this. And one of the reasons was, think hard about it, because a lot of us believe the same things, but not everyone has the same resume. Would you be willing to use that to help the cause? And not everyone has the same ability. Frankly, when Tom talked about money, it takes a lot of money to run a campaign. In the 8th district, you have to, if you're going to win votes, people have to know who you are. And if you're going to win votes, you have to get to know voters. And so that's why the work that Ann does to get out and go door to door, there's no way one person can get to know them. People that go out on a candidate's behalf is incredibly important. So that doesn't cost a ton of money, but it's so reinforced. You could just see the momentum in the campaign come as we were able to be up on air, and everyone knew. You go and say, hey, who's this person? So we were able to do it, and I kind of had some redneck logic, and I just kind of said, well, it's going to take a little bit of money. We'll throw some in, and kind of like standing around in the cold. Sometimes people start talking about building a bonfire while they're shivering. And then over in the corner, there's somebody that goes and grabs some wood and starts building a bonfire. And where everyone shows up is where the fire actually is, not where people are talking about building one. So that's kind of the way we looked at this. There's an opportunity for us to slip in and get some momentum going before anybody else does, or is too far out in front. And so part of that momentum in politics is cash. So we were able to spend a little bit and get some attention. And from there, it really goes, well, so what? You know, because Jeb Bush could have spent $1 trillion this year, and he was not going to win, right? So money alone is not going to win. The message does. And I think that's the point of frustration for our country. This is the argument. This is the tension. And so when I ran, I said I'm with the Republican wing of the Republican Party. That's what Reagan said. Reagan said that in the 80s when our party was really in a similar crossroads. What do we actually stand for? And we had that discussion, and we led arguably one of the best periods in our party's history in winning the Cold War. And people were scared to death. The people on the left, not just the Democrats, but people in our party, were scared he was going to cause World War III. This guy's just too radical. But he didn't. He won. And there is no substitute for victory. So it does build. And now he's remembered not just as this crazy conservative guy, he was an optimistic guy. And so he was able to bypass the Iron Curtain with the truth, but he was also able to bypass the iron media with the truth. Right? So he was able to talk past them and not let them define him as this crazy bomb chucker guy, but as a guy with a passion and a vision, an optimistic vision. He was not able to be brought down to the level that other people were. He stayed positive. He had an amazing sense of humor. And I think today, really, our country's been looking for that ever since, because we went back to the real decision we had in the 80s. We could have gone with an establishment, Rockefeller wing, H.W. Bush in 1980. And so since then, our party's really been struggling. Is there a direction? So we have to have a majority to govern. We have to have a majority that matters. And that's really what this movement has become. In any kind of insurgency, and that's really what this is, it's not an armed insurgency, but any kind of insurgency, it's hard because by and large, it's decentralized operations, right? So how do you have a unified message when everything's so decentralized? And that makes us vulnerable when you're trying to steer a message in a decentralized way, because some people are a little off message. Some people, this is where the concerns that come in as that are distractions. So you can count on the media to show up there. They'll be at the David Duke rally and trying to define all of us as these guys. Or they'll be out there with the most radical thing that's going on in the news cycle to distract from something that's really productive. And that's really the war. It's the war for legitimacy. So how do we stay legitimate? We have to have a positive vision for the future that can bypass that media narrative. Because we're not going to bypass the iron media by leaving vulnerable. And I'll say, for me, that's something that I'm learning to do. And give you some nice words, but I am not a gifted public speaker. I am not somebody who's done this extensively. I had barely done it in public when I decided to start running. So I need to develop my skills. I got to hone the skills. I got to get practice at a lot of things. But what I need to do is to the same sorts of things. We need the kind of energy that comes in campaigns, and we need to provide that endurance. We need people that can go deeper, right? So it can't just be summed up in a tweet. We have problems in our country that are too big for that. So liberty is summed up pretty shortly, pretty succinctly. It can fit with notes in a pocket easily. But our country just can't seem to get the Constitution as the way we're governed. I had an interesting discussion with a lady at the airport yesterday talking about Second Amendment. She really is for a lot more gun restrictions. And I said, well, I would respect your argument more if you were talking about changing the Second Amendment rather than changing the law, because what you're talking about is in violation of our Constitution, and that doesn't seem relevant to her. And when our founders started convening, there weren't constitutional arguments because that was the discourse on the floor. There were more about, is this constitutional, than about, is this good policy? So let me just talk a little bit. This is a Daniel Webster quote in a bicentennial edition of the Constitution here. It says, "It's hardly too strong to say that the Constitution was made to guard the people against the dangers of good intentions. There are men in all ages who mean to govern well, but they mean to govern. They promise to be good masters, but they mean to be masters." We're living that today, and certainly it's true of one party more than the other, but sadly we're not exempt on the right. To preserve our independence, this is Thomas Jefferson. This is another big thing. To preserve our independence, we must not let our rulers load us with perpetual debt. I am for a government rigorously frugal and simple. So these things are true today. We have people that mean to govern, and we have a means of doing that we are incredibly burdened by debt. We are less free, less safe, and more burdened by debt than we've ever been in recent memory. That's not true of all of our country. We've got some real divisions in our country. And as Andrew Breitbart summed up nicely, the class warfare, the haves versus the have-nots did not work in the United States, but the oppressor versus the oppressed has worked as a narrative. And there are a lot of people that have been made to feel oppressed in America. And if you haven't yet been made to feel oppressed, that means you're an oppressor. And no one wants to be an oppressor. So that's the narrative, right? And so how do you get past that narrative? And it's going to have to be with a vision that is deeper than a tweet. But we have to be clever to be able to hang with that. That's where the market is. That's what's going on. So I don't have the answers to that. I've only campaigned a couple times. I didn't start campaigning until December 16th. So I guess I'm 3-0 so far, but 2 were on the same day, March 15th. What I can say is that liberty is incredibly important, and I'm encouraged by the energy among young people for liberty-minded values. Libertarians are growing as the fastest form of conservatives. So their view of conservatism is libertarian, and my view is largely libertarian. I can't get there on all the social issues, and I can't get there on very many of the national security issues. But that leaves me in an odd spot because I'm a Republican, but I'm not a neocon. I'm a guy that when I got out of the Army, I didn't get out of the Army because, as admirable of an idea as it is I would have more family time and I would be able to come back home to Ohio. I got out of the Army because our country was between two ideas that I knew the war would be between those two ideas, and sadly it was accurate. So in 1998, when I was serving in the Ranger Regiment, our embassies in Kenya and Tanzania were bombed by Al-Qaeda. And a lot of people know they were bombed, but not necessarily by Al-Qaeda. And we sent the FBI over. We were in shock because if we weren't going, surely those Navy guys were going, right? That's why we have these kinds of forces, is to deal with these kinds of threats to our security. But this was a see no evil foreign policy. They sent the FBI over. On the other hand, there were people that we called at the time, or a lot of friends of mine did, empire builders. They branded themselves for a time as neocons. And most of this audience knows those guys. These are the people that really do want to build a democratic republic in Iraq. Whatever trillions of dollars of resources, whatever the lives. And there's true believers, and then there's people that see the profit in doing that. And kind of that full spectrum. So that's the two ideas that have defined this era. For people that are 30, that's probably all you've known from the time you started paying attention to politics. So 15 years ago, almost right at 15 years ago, within a couple of weeks, the authorization for all the force that we're using around the world goes back to post 9/11. So we are not holding people accountable. We are not embracing the Constitution. Our founders did not want a king. They vested that power in a Congress. And that power doesn't come with just passively authorizing more funding. That is supposed to come with authorizing a war, a declaration of war, and a holding of the commander-in-chief, regardless of which party, accountable for winning it. And if we can't win it with the resources we've allocated, then we have to decide, shall we find more resources or shall we scale back the mission? But the accountability part isn't supposed to be optional, and that's where we're in rough times. If you look at the state of the country, liberty's under attack. That oath, unfortunately, isn't only under attack outside the country, and that's why our founders said, all enemies, foreign and domestic. And the domestic enemies are different, but you know, in my short time there in Congress, I've seen people advance ideas that have been assaults on our 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 9th, and 10th. And I might have missed the 7th and 8th, but I'm not sure somebody's not working on those. So this is just to stay within the first 10 on the Bill of Rights, right? So these are things that are constantly there, not to mention the broader general welfare clause that so much of our funding comes under, which is to say that we believe that we fund so many things because they're for the general welfare, is to say that James Madison didn't rightly understand the clause, because in his life he explained that, yeah, that's what these enumerated powers refer to, general welfare clause in accordance with these powers. And the 9th Amendment makes it clear that, you know, not all the rights that we have as a nation, as people, individual citizens, are defined here in this federal Constitution. But the ones that aren't enumerated here are reserved for the states. So he was okay with that. And if we're not okay with that as a country, for example, we decided, not because we were endowed by our Creator to be protected by a standing army, but because in coming together as a people, we want to be protected by a standing army. We believe in national security. So we defined that, and we gave Congress the authority and responsibility for doing that. We gave the President the role as Commander-in-Chief, and they're supposed to work together to do that, to secure our country. We could, for example, decide to do health care in some way, shape, or form, preserving a private market, because if we don't, there may not be one. The healthcare sector in the United States is a little bit too much like China's economy. You know, a lot of government, a little bit of free market. Unfortunately, the trend is opposite in the U.S. Government growth is crowding out the free market. In China, they're struggling to get more free market growing. So we could decide that we want to put that, but right now, nearly everything we do under healthcare comes under the General Welfare Clause. These freedoms are under attack, but the underlying premise of the country, so this goes back to Thomas Jefferson's quotes, the underlying premise of the country is at stake because we are on a path to bankruptcy. We are on a path to bankruptcy. It is not compassionate to bankrupt our country. So, in the name of compassion, in the name of anything else, anybody in business knows your ability to operate your business depends on having a strong balance sheet. We do not have a strong balance sheet as a country. We have lots of assets, they're valuable, they're not all monetized, I get that. But we are printing money. We are spending massively more than we have, and very, very few people take seriously the fact that we are on this path. This year, Congress could not agree on a budget. They were fighting over $30 billion of discretionary spending. Shall we spend $30 billion more for the Department of Defense? And back before I won, this was when this debate was going on, I was campaigning. I said, Davidson, you know, you're with these budget hawk guys, Freedom Caucus guys. These guys are saying no unless we hold the line on spending. Do you agree with them? Yeah, I agree with them. You know, number line, zeros here, we're way over here in the negative territory. We should be going closer to zero, not further away from it, right? Agree with them. Well, you're a defense guy. You're talking all this stuff on defense. Don't we need to? Yeah, we need we need a mission, first of all. But B, once we do, there's lots of things we should be doing to strengthen our military. Heck, if we can get those guys $100 billion more, that'd be great. But you can't have it both ways. I'm like, look, unless I'm missing something, we're not off by 30 billion. We're off by $500 billion. Right? So we're not even talking about the elephant in the room, and that's the quote mandatory spending. That's the entitlement service. The biggest part that is causing that crash is debt, and after that, healthcare, Medicare, Medicaid, CHIP, S-CHIP, these kinds of programs that are part of our social safety net. And we want those. Our country, they're popular. We believe in a social safety net. As President Obama says, getting rid of for example, getting rid of those things, that's not who we are. We don't want to leave people abandoned and not have something. But we also don't want to bankrupt our country. So we have to believe the math is real. And when people do that in a nonpartisan way, and they just look at the math, they can recognize, hey, we're at 2/3 right now is, quote, mandatory spending, and we're having a hard time running our country on 1/3 of our spending. In 10 years, it'll be 80%. By 2030, it'll be 100% of what we spend is defined as, quote, mandatory. So when it's mandatory, it doesn't even go through the appropriation process. As a country, we've said we'll spend whatever it takes to honor those commitments, which we should. We've made the commitments. We should honor them. So if you've got a retiree who thought, hey, I'm going to have $2,000 a month for Social Security, maybe they were planning on living on that because they paid off all their bills. Maybe they were planning on living on $6,000 a month and they saved so they could have $4,000. It's not right to take away that money. So there are no easy solutions here. Those are the kinds of things you can't solve with a tweet. These are the kinds of things that take context and depth, and that's why undermining our education, undermining the media narratives that let people have discourse, not just shouting matches on partial facts. So I think for us, that's the thing. Can we be those people that become the problem solvers? Can we be the people that not only identify the problem, but the people that are offering sound, reasoned, rational solutions? And if we can be the party that provides solutions to these problems, then we can win. Because we are headed for this reality. We are going towards Niagara Falls on a lazy boat on Lake Ontario. And every year we kick the can down the road. We don't take action. So when we could have made a small rudder correction 10 years ago and turned back out to the lake, well, now we're getting pulled a little faster towards the falls. It's going to be ugly. My hope is we can go through it in a structured way. We may not. And if you don't go through it in a structured way, maybe it's time to create the ammunition caucus. It's going to be ugly, right? So this is a real challenge for our country, right? Because security will be there, and that's the final thing I want to talk about is security. I talked a lot about it, but security, not just foreign, but domestic. We're at great peril right now. Not just internationally, not because we can't decide whether air conditioners are a bigger threat than ISIS, but because we can't figure out how to rightly enforce our laws in the streets, whether it's Charlotte or Baton Rouge or all over the country. This is being exploited. This is being exploited by people that are working towards an end at odds with ours, with our way of life, with the idea of protecting the Second Amendment, with the idea of protecting due process. I was at a briefing that I can't talk about the content of, except to say that one of the people who was curious, well, why can't we know this, this, this? What are we doing that's preventing you from doing that? And one of my new good friends, Thomas Massey's like, the Constitution? And, so again, at play in each of those, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, in that discussion right there. So it comes back. Can we do this in a way that solves a problem? I'm frustrated perhaps as much as anyone about the idea of disrespecting our flag, disrespecting where we're going as a country. But in law enforcement, a handful of bad actors are tearing down an incredibly noble profession. We need these people, and they're going to start struggling more and more for good, honest people to go serve. They put their lives on the line to defend our streets, to protect, serve and protect, right, in our communities. And it goes up from that, just a community, to the county sheriff, an incredibly important position in our country, to, then you start shifting over, and now you're not talking about domestic things. We're being burdened in the streets with our law enforcement because we're not secure in our country. Not just fighting a direct enemy, but we can't secure our southern border. And over 2/3 of the drugs in our streets are coming in across that border. So then you go out and look, what can we do for the other things? So when you talk about the European social model, right, as the the quote example that a lot of the left in America wants to point to as it works. A, it doesn't work that way. B, they spend almost nothing on defense. We've given it to them for free. Actually, we've paid for the privilege of giving it to them. What are we going to do? Get rid of our national security? I've talked to a lot of people about Social Security, younger people. I'm like, don't worry, we'll close the Department of Defense before we cut entitlements. And unfortunately, that's the path we've been on. We're not dealing with the mandatory spending side. We're dealing with the sequester. We've got the smallest Navy we've had since World War II, maybe World War I. We've got an incredibly small number of trigger pullers on active duty. We are crashing aircraft because we are not maintaining aircraft at higher rates. We're buying $300 a gallon jet fuel to win the war on climate change with our Department of Defense, when we could buy $3 or $4 a gallon jet fuel and let our people train to be proficient and combat ready. Our nation's military is supposed to be focused on fighting and winning our nation's wars, and instead they're being tasked to be America's most progressive workforce. And we are okay with that as a country. This is at stake in this election. So this is an incredibly important election. It's important, first of all, at the top of the ticket. A lot of people have had a hard time cozying up to Trump. Some people love Trump. What I've said is, I'm voting for him. He has to win. The alternative, there's the other options, and I get the principle of pushing for somebody like a Gary Johnson, but one of these two people are going to win. And the alternative of having Hillary Clinton as our next president, the alternative of having Hillary Clinton as our commander-in-chief, is just unfathomable. I mean, you look at the 7.5 years now, a lot of people had a hard time cozying up to Mitt Romney, right? Look where our country would be if we had Mitt Romney these past 3.5 years. There's no comparison where we would be. So, it's not elegant, it's not beautiful. I've been there a little bit, and I'm just going to end. We talked a lot about some of those things. I'm going to end by answering a couple questions if people have them, but I'm going to end by saying this. When I got there, I didn't have incredibly high expectations, as you can probably tell from some of the concerns about the country. This is what made me step away from a business that I spent 15 years building. This is what made me spend time away from my family. This is what made me donate the largest amount of money to our campaign. I mean, thankfully we had it, but what bigger cause do we have? Faith, for sure, for me, is greater than our country, but only a little bit, right? Maybe bordering on idolatry, if you get into the doctrine of it. So this country and our way of life, I can't really imagine the world without it. And when Reagan said, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction, in the 60s, that sounded a little bit like political rhetoric. And when he said it a lot in the 80s, when he was president, it didn't feel that way because we had so much energy and momentum. But I can tell you, we're a long ways away from the nation that won our Cold War. We are a long ways away. So I want to answer some questions, and I want to tell you that there are more good people in Congress that know and believe all these same things that I just talked about than I would have ever believed. This is in the House. If I watched a documentary about it, if I saw a TV show, if I heard an interview, if I heard a guy standing on stage talking about it that was there, I'd say, oh no, this guy's already being transformed. All right. There are more, I've only been there 3 months. There are more good people than I would have ever believed. They're not a majority, but we got to go out and get more of them elected. And what you guys are doing is incredibly important. And you know more about the process than I probably do, so I won't say anything more about it. So I'll answer some questions.
Could you briefly address the Freedom Caucus?
Well, okay, yeah, talk about the Freedom Caucus. So this time last year, if you had asked me the difference between the Steel Caucus and the Freedom Caucus, I would have been able to tell you one of them talks about steel and the other one talks about freedom. There's all kinds of caucuses in Congress, right? You know, so there's the Scots-Irish caucus. There's all this stuff up there, right? And it's really just normally people clustered around an idea and they just go talk about the issues. So the Freedom Caucus kind of turned into its own near conference, really, a block of people that's about 40 people strong that said, we care about, first and foremost, don't bankrupt our country, and the rules matter, because they were largely being blocked out of even proposing amendments. So they had a lot of frustrations with the process when Speaker Boehner was there, right? So that led to some conflicts with leadership, and ultimately, part of that led to timing. John Boehner served for 25 years. The Pope came. There was also this motion to vacate the chair. There were some other things going on in the country, and so it created an opening. But the Freedom Caucus is really still an early stage group. So they've only been around a couple years. Their main mission in their early formation was accomplished. They got a new leader. So Speaker Ryan is early into the job. He has addressed many of the concerns that the Freedom Caucus talked about with leadership. So, for example, there is a game plan. Where are we headed? That was the right criticism. You know, if you don't know where you're going, anywhere will do, right? The old saying. And for a lot of people, growing our majorities wasn't enough. We didn't want to just be we're not as bad as Democrats. We want to be this party that stands for stuff. So the Freedom Caucus was that kind of right-wing part of the party that said, hey, what about our party's platform? What about these principles? And they kept trying to pull that, not as far to the right as they could get it, but really to our party's platform. What did we say we were going to do? And that's the challenge right now. Can the party, and Trey Gowdy is not part of the Freedom Caucus, but I use him to illustrate the point. Trey Gowdy, other than Speaker Ryan, is probably the most famous member of Congress right now. He's been well covered because he's dealt with IRS scandals and he's dealt with Benghazi and a number of issues. He's a key guy on an oversight committee. So with Benghazi and IRS and all this coverage and an 800-page report that's been published that'll be good for historians, other than complaining on Facebook, what's different? I mean, he's really famous. He's got a lot of hits on Facebook. But Congress does not exist to make us famous. It does not exist so that we can have access to official media to complain on Facebook. When we do, it's supposed to change the course of the country, right? Congress is being ignored. You know, people are coming in unprepared, willfully, so that they can give inaccurate testimony and correct later and not commit perjury or lie. It's just inaccurate. And when the subpoenas aren't completely ignored, because there's people that just don't appear, there's people that don't turn over the evidence, that don't stop what they're doing. When the subpoena isn't ignored, the course of action is to destroy the evidence. So there has to be some sort of accountability there. So Freedom Caucus is pushing that and trying to get the vote on Caucus. So these are the groups that's doing that. They're standing for those things. They are fighting for stuff, but it has to be not just that we complain on Facebook, but that we really work to change the laws, and that's the tension right now with those guys. Yes?
The heart of the presidential campaign, the stretch run, starts on Labor Day. And I know I was discussing this with a priest, but Labor Day in the Catholic Church, that's when Mother Teresa was canonized, became St. Teresa of Calcutta. And I've been praying for St. Teresa's intercession in this campaign, and a priest who pointed out, oh, it's very good that she is having an influence on this, and it's had a turn in Donald Trump's favor because he's pro-life. But those of us, we want to see the funding cut for Planned Parenthood. We want to see abortion illegal. And I know it has to happen at the state level, but if we have both houses of Congress and Donald Trump wins the White House, which I believe he will, could Congress pass a bill banning abortion, and the president signs it, and abortion is illegal in all 50 states, and we get the right Supreme Court justice, and they make it constitutional? Can that happen?
Right now, there are over 400 bills that have passed the House that are at the Senate, right? The House, there's over 30 that just deal with fixing the VA that have passed the House. So when I got there, I said, well, what about this? What about this? Oh, yeah, we passed that. Oh, yeah, we passed that. Yeah, that's a good bill. it's over at the Senate. The common lingo there is the Senate's where good bills go to die. So we don't have control of the Senate. Harry Reid has control of the Senate. Now, whether he should or shouldn't, I would like to see Mitch McConnell give a good answer for every Sunday on Meet the Press, frankly, or maybe a better show every night on Bill O'Reilly or something, whatever. But I would really like to see our Senate focused on the same things. So, and with respect to abortion, I just want to say, look, the playbook is a sick book that I can't say it's worth reading, except that it turned out to be the playbook on gay marriage. It's called After the Ball. This book was written by some Harvard professors in the early 90s. And they said, this is where we're going to go. And facts don't matter. It's really marketing. And so in the 90s, even California said no thanks to gay marriage. Heck, in 2008, Obama was against gay marriage, right? Now we need a national bathroom policy. So where have we gone? The momentum has gone off the charts down this playbook because they knew what they were committed to. And sometimes there's Republicans, conservatives, we tend to push hard and then we didn't win, so we're on to the next topic. What progressives have figured out, this is what we stand for, and we're like the water torture, drip, 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 hit of this is the path we're going. And so they stayed patient, and in a generation, they went from California not favoring gay marriage to the point they're willing to adopt a constitutional amendment, to the point where it's the, if you watch the presidential debates and saw our governor, it's the settled law of the country, right? But it's not the settled law because they're pushing for more. And if they can't do it in politics, they'll do it in the media. And if they can't do it in the media, they'll do it in entertainment. And if they can't do it there, they'll try sports. Hello, North Carolina. So for abortion, facts are on our side. We're going to have to change. We're going to have to amend the Constitution to do it. But even if we got it that way, it's not a one-play thing. There's no Hail Mary that's going to create it. We have to commit to do the same sort of fight that the progressives have figured out to be masters of. So I think my time's expired. We've talked a lot. I'm going to be around for a little while. There's a very full agenda today. It's an honor to talk with you guys, and I really especially want to thank Ann Becker and the group of folks that got behind this campaign, took a risk on a crazy guy who knew very little about politics but was really passionate about serving. And it's an honor to be there doing it. Thanks for your help.